and welcome to today's webinar, How to Handle Difficult Audience Members. Peter Dhu is my name, public speaking trainer and coach. Whether we call them hecklers, whether we call them difficult audience members, whether we call them people who are there just to hassle us, there's some tips, some skills we can all use to deal with those more difficult customers, those more difficult people that we have in our rooms, and that'll make our job as a trainer, speaker, presenter so much easier. And much of this is to do with what our message is. Are we delivering bad news? Are we downsizing? Are we reducing some funding? All of these messages will trigger something in our audience, so we can anticipate that there will be some difficult questions, some hecklers in the room. So let's get started. Rules as per normal. Ask questions, type in the chat as you want to. Put your own comments in. I was presenting or running a training last week and this particular thing happened, and take notes. And of course, we do record these webinars, so you can review them in your own time if you're unable to attend, or if you wish to go over some of the content that I have covered during today's webinar. So, what do you do when someone's at you, when someone's disagreeing with you, when you need to remain credible and confident in the eyes of the audience? Here's some tips. So the first one is remain calm and composed. I always talk about remaining calm while under fire. And this can even be the job interview, where the interview panel is asking you difficult questions. They're not really heckling you, but you're under fire. So the ability to remain calm, even while perhaps struggling to answer a particular question. The metaphor I use is the black swan that glides across the water, looking very beautiful, majestic, calm, and behind there's that beautiful ripple, that mesmerizing wake that the black swan leaves behind. And of course, below the water, the legs are churning 100 miles an hour. And so remaining calm while under fire, remaining calm and composed is about, even though inside in your tummy you're saying, oh gosh, on the outward you remain calm. You don't let your nonverbal communication give away that the heckler is getting to you. So averting eye contact and doing disruptive nonverbal communication. Great skill to have. You might get a difficult question. You might have a hard job interview. You may have a difficult person in your audience. Remain calm while under fire. I think with all presentations, both with difficult people and people that are on your side, empathy and validating or validation are very important traits to exhibit. Even someone who's not heckling you and maybe gives you an idea, adds to what you're saying, but you might think it's a silly idea. In my view, no silly ideas. So I will validate what they've said. That's a really interesting point of view. And I will show empathy to them. If someone goes off on a little bit of a rant down a rabbit hole, I'll listen to them, show empathy, and try and bring them back on track as quick as I can. So even though they're a heckler or a difficult person, I think empathy and validating, that's an interesting point of view. That's a little bit outside of scope of what I'm talking about, but that is a very interesting, oh, I haven't thought of that before. Interesting way of looking at things. This validation is a great way of showing that you're listening, even though you're going to disagree with them and redirect possibly. Empathy and validation is a great tool to have in your toolkit when dealing with difficult people or hecklers in your audience. Stay respectful. Even when someone's at you or they are disagreeing, I would never let my language change, my attitude change visually to anyone in the room. I will respect them. So thanks for that interesting point of view. I'm going to have to disagree with you here, but the respect and, you know, that's an interesting point of view. Does anyone else have other points of view? So even when that person's heckling you all the time and at you, keep being respectful. And even if you have to take a question on notice, still be respectful. Look, that's a little bit outside of scope, or I don't have the answer for that. Really good question. Let me find out and I'll get back to you later on. I'll get back to you by the end of the day. I'll get back to you first thing tomorrow morning. Respectful, as opposed to, look, that's a stupid question. It's way off scope. I'm not even going to bother dealing with it. And that would be disrespectful. Redirect diplomatically. And the redirection can be around the facts they're using. And they may disagree with you and say, look, I read this article, and you can be respectful and redirect diplomatically by saying, yep, I've read that article. However, that's been disproven by Harvard Business Review that has overwhelmingly found that this is the common theme. So, yeah, you know, with respect, this is what we're talking about. And once again, I love that you're well read. I love your alternative point of view, but this is what I'm talking about today. So redirect, and I'll help you with that redirection a little bit later on with one of the other tips. You can offer private discussion. So this is where we take it offline. And sometimes there may be something that's quite emotionally charged. And one of the rules with public speaking and training is we don't do counseling, we don't do therapy from stage. So if someone offers something that triggers you and you feel you need to deal with it, but not in the room, you can say, look, I think I really love what you're saying here. That's a really interesting point of view. I need to stay on topic. Can you and I have a chat at the morning tea break? I'd really like to discuss this a little bit further for you. So take it offline, and then even if it's not something that you need to attend to, so trauma or a personal story that you don't want discussed in the room, even if it is just a heckler, you're maintaining the sanity of the rest of the room. You're maintaining the rest of the room on the topic you're talking about by taking it offline. Involve the audience. So what do you think about that idea? That's a really interesting idea. Do people have other ideas? And then often you can get the weight of the audience to build your point of view and not disprove, but, you know, put the other person's, the heckler's point of view into perspective. The person who disagrees, put their point of view into perspective, because the majority of the audience is on your side. The question is, if the discussion involves the audience and the discussion is overwhelming in support of what the heckler is saying, then you need to redirect, or you need to look at your content and what is it that has made the whole audience think this when you're trying to redirect them to this particular point of view. As I started my presentation, it depends on what you're talking about. If you're delivering bad news, let's say you're shutting down a community hall and the whole room is from the community, they're all going to be against you. So you will be heckled, but hopefully respectfully. You need to go back to the fundamental reason why this hall is being closed down or why the funding's being removed. and be really clear on why that is happening. And you need to stick to that message. You need to stick to, this is why we're doing it this way. This is the reason that we have to do this. That's when you're delivering a bad news story. And you might do that from a human resource perspective, as a CEO perspective. We've heard on the news, the board, the Qantas board has been really hammered recently. All the shareholders, an angry, hostile crowd, and the way that the CEO dealt with that with respect and was really quite good. So involve your audience. One of the models I always use is tell. So I'll talk to you, show, put the data up on a PowerPoint, ask, what would you do in that situation? How would you handle that range of scenarios? If that was your company, what would you do? And the ask is not one that I need an answer, but the ask is taking you into your head. What would you do with a heckler? Think of some of the strategies that you might use. And then the last part of my circle, tell, show, ask is share. And in a small group, I would ask, can anyone share what they would do with a heckler? In a big group, 100 people, turn to the person next to you, have a chat to the person next to you for 2 minutes. How would you possibly deal with hecklers? So that share happens one-on-one with a group of 100 people, one to the group in a group of 10 or 15 people. Involving the audience is a great way to deal with hecklers, and especially if the heckler's an outsider. So just off topic, off track, taking a very niche, divergent view, and you know the majority of the people are in the room to learn this, you can use the audience to sway the disagreement, the heckler, to understand why everyone else thinks a similar thing. I mentioned something you can do to help deal with things up front, and that is about setting the boundaries or the rules up front. And by letting people know, this is what I'm here to talk about. This is the scope. This is the framework of what I'm here to talk about. I'm not here to talk about this, and this is also outside of topic. And then when the heckler or the difficult person starts asking questions or starts raising topics outside of the scope, you can respectfully shut them down. Look, as I mentioned in my introduction, I'm unable to comment on this. I'm unable to talk about that. The rules can be about how many questions. So you might say, look, I've got a lot of information I want to cover today. Can I limit it to one comment, one question per person? So then when your heckler or your difficult person comes back for a second or a third or a fourth go at you, you can say, look, we all agreed up front. We all agreed one question per person. Now I need to move on. I've got another question over here. So what can you do to set the expectations of the audience so that if someone keeps interrupting, someone keeps heckling, that they know why you're shutting them down? So this is about setting the boundaries up front. I did a presentation earlier this week, Monday, and it was a classroom of school kids, 14-year-olds, 22 kids. One person sat up the front. You know the people who sit up the front are the keen ones, and he kept asking questions. And I had only 15 minutes to deliver my content, and I valued his questions. So after about 2 or 3 questions, I had to say, look, just a moment. I noticed there's a few other questions in the room. So I got through all the other questions. I still had time, and I said, right, we've got time for one more question. So I was able to go back to him. So that was setting some boundaries and also being respectful to him and everyone else in the room. And the last one, sometimes we need to agree to disagree. Someone has a strong point of view. It's not what you're talking about. Look, I'm sorry, I have to stick to my guns. This is what I'm here to talk about. This is my research. This is my point of view. I think you and I just have to agree to disagree. All right, let's move on. So there are my tips to help you deal with difficult people, sometimes hecklers. Remain calm and composed. This is the black swan moving graciously, effortlessly across the water underneath churning. Even with a heckler, please still show empathy and validate. Interesting point of view. I like the way you're thinking. Stay respectful. Well, that's a stupid question. Have you not been listening? Don't do that. Offer private discussion, so we need to take that offline. Involve the audience. Set the rules up front, the boundaries, expectations, and sometimes we need to agree to disagree. What have I got coming up? A couple of workshops in Port Hedland, 23rd of November, 24th of November. Winding down for the end of the year. My calendar is fully open for 2024. Upcoming webinar, this is December. So I'm presenting virtually. I'm sitting in a coffee shop because I have another meeting immediately in Fremantle. Mistakes to avoid when presenting virtually. And ordinarily, I would be standing up, but because I'm in a coffee shop, I have to make do with the circumstances. 4th of December, 6 mistakes to avoid when presenting virtually. You know how to reach me. Any comments, any feedback would be welcome. Any further questions? I'm seeing nothing in the chat box at the moment. Thanks for your participation. And remember, any of these tips can be used to help you better deal with hecklers, better deal with disagreement, just those difficult people that time to time turn up at your workshop, turn up at your seminar, and they can be quite difficult. Now you've got some strategies, some tools to help you remain calm while under fire. This is Peter Dhu, public speaking trainer and coach, wishing you well on your public speaking journey. Bye for now.